the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. The best and brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes. We'll talk to them all, and we'll get the good, the bad, and the ugly on how they made it. Decoding the secrets of success. Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. Unveiling the paths to success. And now your host, Terry Barr.
I just wanted to let the folks that are listening know we have a really special guest, Tracy Smith. He's the head baseball coach at Michigan, brand new position. He's been in a couple different schools over the past 20 years, and we're excited to have him. For those of you who don't know, we're lifelong friends, and this is an opportunity to hear about his story. Now, obviously we'll hear some baseball, we'll hear some family stuff, but we really want to get into what this podcast is all about, and that's the grit behind the grind. In other words, how did he get there? What was his mindset? Is that something that anybody can duplicate? And what did he spend time doing to make it to where he's at? So just a little bit of an introduction. He's the head coach at Michigan. He also played in the ranks. So he was drafted in 1988, 38th in the June draft, and played, I guess that was the Cubs, right?
Yeah. And that, yeah.
Yeah, the Cubs. Good. So I wanted to get right into it. I don't want to take too much of your time, but we want to hear your story. You started out and tell me a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up. I guess if you look at the size of the town, nobody expects somebody like yourself to come out of the size of the town. It's a pretty small town, but tell us about where you grew up.
Joe, you know a little bit about that childhood now too. So
yes, sir.
Well, yeah, Kentland, Indiana. Town of 1,800 people by last count. I'm not really sure what it is now. I don't know if it's growing or it's shrinking, but yeah, super small town. But it's funny that you bring up the town, because I talk about that even in recruiting with parents today, because, and again, not saying that you can't get a good upbringing in other places. Obviously you can, but I mean, I think that town has a lot of the fabric, and honestly, in how, who I am as a person, but also how we run our program. And whether it's at Miami of Ohio to Indiana to ASU to here, I talk about, just I always say, I've said just a small town guy who's gotten pretty lucky over time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've seen you from afar. Now we live in two different states. Obviously we don't get a chance to see each other very often, but I've seen you from afar really kind of grow up as a kid yourself, through the coaching ranks, play video games with your guys and cutting up and all of those things that you love to do when you're young, and then growing into this old seasoned vet that you are now. Tell me about your early on, your mindset when you were just starting out as a player. What were your goals as a player? Did you know you were going to eventually be a coach, because you seemed to fit that bill really well? But tell me about what you were thinking when you started thinking about goals, and what were they?
Great question. When you're playing, you're still playing. And I got to be honest with you, I never really thought about being a coach, because I was playing. And your whole mindset when you're playing is keep playing as long as you can until somebody tells you can't. And so I would love to sit here and tell you that I had this master plan that, when I stopped playing baseball or whatever, that I was going to fast track into coaching. But the reality of the matter is, and back to the playing days, put a little perspective when you talk about grind. I can remember vividly spring training 91, and my wife's pregnant, Jamie's pregnant with our first, and the Cubs at that time said, and this is where times are a little bit different today. They said, if you go home for the birth of your child, because she's pregnant, she's getting ready to have, they said, if you go home, stay home. And so how about that?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. When I started playing professionally, I said, look, if I'm not continuing to progress through the system as a player on the field, then I'm going to shut it down myself. And I think, so in spring training of 91, I think coupled with the fact that my first child is going to be born, I missed the birth of that.
Oh, boy.
I'm not bragging about that, but it's back to the grind. It literally was posed that way, that if you leave, you don't come back. And so I missed that, having a pretty successful spring training, but I got put back on the roster that I was on the year before. And so I was kind of stagnant. So I kind of hung it up myself. And I remember going in and not really having a life plan at that point, other than I said, I've got a college, got a college degree in hand. I want to see what next steps of life unfold in front of me, but I actually started my career coaching at the branch campus of Miami University as a basketball coach after a failed opportunity at an administrator position. I thought I wanted to be an administrator.
Okay.
And it's funny how life kind of, throws different twists and turns at you. And I was devastated because and I say this humbly, but some success. And I really hadn't had a lot of no's in my life. And when I was told no on that administrator thing, I was devastated. I was mad. I was angry. But all the doors that then opened up, and that's honestly how it started, was given a chance to start coaching basketball, and that's where the love began.
So tell me about that moment in time where, you went from having a good spring training, which was reflective of my spring training before I got cut, but you had this good spring training started. You feel like you're doing well. You get that big no. You transition. You get another no when you go to Miami. As far as administratively, what was your mindset there? Tell me how you work through that. As athletes, we work through injuries, we work through slumps, we work through all kinds of things. But when it's not a familiar fail, how did you work through that mindset?
Well, it's funny. I didn't know at the time. And again, I go back, and a lot of these things I think we figure out at the young, early stages of our lives, because there weren't podcasts back in the day and all of these things where you could take these experiences and people thought about them intellectually and then would help and pass on knowledge and experiences. At the time, I didn't know, but what I subsequently learned, I guess I would say, a really good friend of mine, and I would recommend that you and your listeners,
get a shot at it.
Do some digging on this guy, Scott Pelton with Tignum.
Oh yeah,
and he talks about reframing, and it's like taking that circumstance, that situation that's ultimately, or maybe you perceive it to be a negative at that time, but really it's just another opportunity to reframe and set your sights and direction on another path. And in the coaching profession, which is now, I had another big reframe coming later in my life with this situation at Arizona State.
Yeah.
So, I think in those times like that, I've never been afraid of that. I've never been afraid. Now I think about that, how lucky I am to have those no's, because it forces you. I've always said that to even my colleagues and friends that have the misfortune of maybe getting fired or something happens, a coaching change or whatever. It forces you to really center in on and look at and use your resources, use your network to be creative and reinvent yourself, or, as I said, reframe yourself. So back to that time, I didn't know that I was doing that at the time, but I went into that kind of, this coaching thing. I like sport. I like people. Let's give this thing a go. And that's really, it was as simple as that. And I wish I could give you this thing where I just sat down and locked myself in a room and said, hey man, but I didn't do that. It was just this open mind. It's a good point in my life to kind of start and try something different. And that's how it happened.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I know it's in college sports, especially at D1 and professional sports, it's such a business, and there's a very small pool of people that have the skill set that you have. Like, nobody can just walk up the street and say, I want to be a head coach at Michigan and have an opportunity to do that. So, you guys get let go and picked up and let go and picked up across the board. And it just seems like it's such a business to become a business. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. If you're not in the win column right out of the gate, I mean, you're on the hot seat. And that to me is a harder thing in some respects to deal with, knowing that, hey, if I'm not winning out of the gate, I got to start wondering what they're thinking about me. So maybe you talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think the difference, because I think all of us, and you included, I mean, the things that you do, there's wins and losses in everything you do. And I think, but the most obvious differences maybe is that, as a coach, you're on public display, and just like we've talked here, you've played baseball, and I mean, our sport and the one that I've chosen, a lot of people played it, and everybody's got an opinion on it, and everybody's a professional. So I just, I just looked at that as the opportunity to do that, and you're in the public arena, but you keep both feet in today. It was what you were just saying too about not everybody has the ability. I think there are a lot of people that have the ability to do what I do and what you do, but it becomes a war of attrition. It becomes of getting knocked down, and can you get back up off of that and reframe and, attack and keep going. That's the part of it. For me, as I see young coaches, I get guys all the time saying, hey man, I want to be a coach. I want to be a college coach. I want to do what you do. And first thing I tell them, I said, man, it's attrition.
Yeah.
It's just a war of attrition. You got to be able to keep going, because this is a long and tedious grind to, ultimately succeed.
So most people in all stages of life, professionals, in any walk of life, have certain people that they rely on, certain people they lean on for advice, for mentorship. Even, I have mentors in my business. I've been in the business for a long time. Tell me about the people that maybe you are your go-to people, and if you don't need to name them if you don't want to, but who do you go to when the head coach at Michigan says, I have a gray spot here, or I have a blind spot here, I need to get some advice? Who do you get your advice from?
Well, great question. And this is one of those things, and I'm sure because what are we? We're probably a year or so difference in age.
Yeah, 2 years. Yep.
Life, as you go through life, and this is the thing that happened to me, Terry, when the ASU situation happened, and I'm out, and I'm close to when I, quote unquote, could retire, one of those things. I really started to think about, of 30 years in this business, in this profession, like how big my network is.
Yeah.
Well, and so back to the question of, early in my career, I'd say honestly, it was my father-in-law. Lynn Darbyshire was a longtime coach, administrator, one of the greatest influences on me and my philosophies and how I would do things as a coach. And I get asked this question a lot, and have over the years. Another gentleman that no one has ever heard of, that's probably one of the greatest influences on me, the guy named Jimmy Slager. He was the basketball coach at this little branch campus of Miami University. But just when I was an assistant with him, but to work with Jimmy every single day and to see how he went about it, the principles and the morals and the ethics by which he did it, is something I still think about to this day. But back to the network, when you asked your specific question about
right.
Michigan, I've got a lot of people to choose from now that I've met over the years, that if it's a question in, professional baseball, you pick up the phone, you call anybody. I mean, I've had sitting having dinner and conversation with some of the greatest of, Tony La Russa, and picking his brain about managing and all of those. So, when I start adding up, I can't sit here and tell you that it's one thing or one book, but it's just taking all of those people that come into your life over the course of your career and having a growth mindset. And I tell my staff when they go out, and I say this, when you go out, whether it's recruiting or you go speak at a convention, whatever, come back with 3 to 5 people that you've met, that you put in that network, that you can, call upon and service and back and forth over your career. So that's kind of how I.
That's good. That's good wisdom. I know networks are important. You grow up as a young guy, at least I did. I don't know how, what you thought, but I grew up as a young guy. I felt like I knew a lot about a lot. And when you get older, you don't know much about anything. So the bigger your network and the more people you can draw on with different opinions and different outlooks, it just makes for a more full decision or a more full life as far as that's concerned. So I totally 100% agree with you on that. A book came to mind when you talked about the book you read, but John Acuff wrote it, and it's called Soundtracks. So you said reframing, and he wrote a book about soundtracks. When something triggers you, when you're in a certain situation where a soundtrack starts to play. I'm 0-2. This is what I think about during that 0-2 period. A soundtrack starts playing in your mind, and how to change that soundtrack. And so that reminded me when you said reframe my decision maker, reframe my life, or whatever it is. That book came to mind. It's a really, really good book for my business, because we get a lot of questions and objections and all those things. So to change your mindset is super important. But tell me about your family a little bit. I know we started a little quick, but I know your wife's name's Jamie. You got 3 boys. Just give me some basics on those guys.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, as I said, her father-in-law was, again, one of the best influences on me. And we had the good fortune of, producing 3 sons that, pretty proud of and what they're doing in their various spots. My oldest, Casey, actually played for me in our World Series. That's an interesting thing. Played for me coaching your son has its own challenges. Let's just say that.
It does.
But he is in film production and actually just started in a new company with Dolphin Entertainment and the digital department, and working in the NIL space for college athletes across the country.
All right.
Kind of a cool deal. My middle son, Ty, played college football at Indiana and is now a successful baseball agent with RSR, which is Rosenhaus Sports.
Yeah, big one. Yeah.
And so really proud, and it's fun to see him taking a football guy. Now he's in the baseball space. And then my youngest one, Jack, signed in a Power 5 school as well, and is now on staff coaching after his playing career. He's following his father's footsteps, but he's doing it on the football side. Smarter because the salaries are bigger in that stuff.
That's true.
He's at the University of Oregon. I thought we were going to have, Terry, a Michigan-Oregon matchup if they'd won the Pac.
Yeah, I saw that game. I thought of your son. I know he's pretty new to that position, and I thought, I've been watching, some of your posts throughout the year, and I thought, oh man, this is going to be a great year. They're going to end up in the finals, but that was tough. That was a tough one for sure. But
I was just hoping for the match of Michigan, and it would have been in the Rose Bowl. We had our Airbnb already reserved, and then we had to cancel all that. So.
Oh, you're not going? You're not gonna support the?
Well, because now Oregon plays in Phoenix, which is where our other place is, the very same day. So
that's
not
great.
A bad consolation
No,
prize.
not a bad consolation. That's pretty awesome. That's great. Let me just pull this up quick.
And just so when I took the job at ASU, everybody, my parents moved out there.
I was going to say everybody moved. They're still there, aren't they?
Everybody moved out, and they're all there because they got a taste of that warm weather. They're not coming.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Both my boys live out there now. I think you knew that.
Yep.
And my youngest son got married. He just flew back into Pennsylvania today, so I get a chance to see my other boys out there. They enjoy the heat, but boy, when it gets hot, it gets hot. It gets hot out there. It's a dry heat.
Well, think about my job, though, man. I'm outside, so I'll take that heat over cold weather any day.
Yeah, those spring practices in Michigan can't be fun, right?
Oh, yeah. And we'll talk about this, but I'm sure, but it's all people. I don't care what the weather is, what your profession is, coaching, business, real estate. It's people. And if you have good people in your organization or whatever, it doesn't matter. And so
that's
we
true. So we go from, your playing career where you got kind of cranked up, you got started, didn't go, the way you wanted it to go. You made some decisions that were the best for your family. You got into coaching finally. At what point during your early coaching years did things start to make sense? Because I know those new jobs, you can't just pop into a coaching job and say, okay, I'm under control and I know everything. At what point did the game slow down for you as a coach? How long were you in it before things really started to cook and you felt like you had a grip on things? When you play that long, obviously, you know the game, you know what you would do if you were a coach, but now that you're a coach, how long did that kind of take to get
another great question
cranked up?
Yeah, another great question. I would say, I don't think you ever really figure it all out. I think the comfort level, I think back to this job in particular, because when I was at Miami of Ohio as a player, we used to play Michigan a lot with Barry Larkin and I would always look at those guys in awe, and I looked at this institution in awe. So I say that to say that I never in a million years would think of myself coaching here. It just seemed like this thing that was no way. But now that I'm in it, and again, I say this respectfully and without, but it's easy for me now, because I've seen a lot over my career, and back to the experience of ASU, back to, you said, the playing, when someone tells you or you're not good enough at something and ultimately that door closes, then you got to reframe and you take, but you grow from every one of those situations. So if I go back and I look at my career, I don't know that I ever really, like I say, figured it out, but where I really started to get comfortable was the good experiences of the winning that validates. And I can remember sitting in the World Series in 2013 because, and we haven't spent a lot of time in our adult lives together, but I mean, one of my favorite sayings is like, take your job seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. And what I mean by that is like, look, this is supposed to be fun. Life is supposed to be fun. We don't have a lot of time on this planet. So we can work hard. You don't have to be a jerk. You can hold people accountable and you can do all of these things, but you can still be a human being. And I remember in 2013 when taking Indiana to the College World Series at a place that when I was evaluating that job, every one of my colleagues said, do not take that job. You cannot win there. But here you are now sitting in Omaha, Nebraska of the state school, and I literally remember doing this. I remember looking down the table at the press conference and I'm seeing all these legendary coaches and people that I really admired. I'm like just sitting at the same table with them. I'm like, you know what? Your system works. I mean, I remember having that thought. So maybe it was that moment, I remember that moment distinctly, and that's over 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you guys won the super regional, right? And then you went to, what was it, Tallahassee, I think, and beat those. Yep. That was a super regional, I guess. And then, yep. But you hosted the regionals, I guess, right?
And, and Schwarber makes things a little easier for you.
Yeah, him and what was the other kid that, which one?
We had 5 big leaguers on that team.
Torkelson, and was it Torkelson on there?
Well, Torkelson was ASU. But Sam Travis.
Oh, okay, that's right.
A big leaguer.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know that we ever, I said it earlier about growth mindset. So, but back to the ASU thing and being here, I just remember like the alumni, I know some people saying to me when I took the job, I was like, hey man, like, you got to be really able to navigate this alumni and the pressure. And I'm literally like, dude, I'm good. I was just in a situation, taking that situation in Arizona State. Look, I've been through that. So every stop along the way, and this is, again, whether it's coaching or whatever business, you take those and you put those in your toolbox to where that presents itself in the future, then you're going to feel like you're ready for that situation. So, which comes age and wisdom.
Yeah, age and wisdom. Isn't that the truth? Do your boys, you have a good enough relationship? Do they listen to you? Do they listen to that age and wisdom, or are they still trying to figure some of that stuff out?
That's it. Well, you got boys, so you probably know, and like you never stop parenting. You know that.
Yeah.
I talk to my boys, quite frankly. We talk probably at least once every 2 days. They're calling in various things on their profession. So no, we have a really, really cool relationship, and being able to counsel them and yeah, I've tried to help them shorten that learning curve early on, but like you got to let them do their thing and maybe fail and succeed. And how many times lately I'll say this, but a couple of them say, yeah, I should have listened to you a long time, but that's part of the growth part of that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I know you got a little grandbaby. You got one grandbaby or 2 grandbabies now. I like your Facebook posts. It's either the grandbabies or the dog. I mean, you're big on the pups, right? Big on the pups.
And the cats. I got cats all over here. Yeah. Yeah.
They'll keep you safe.
Well, that phase of life, people would always talk about it on the grand. Hey, can't wait till you get to that. And I'm like, yeah, right. It is correct. I mean, that grandbaby thing is the best. We have 2 grandsons. Actually, I have a granddaughter coming in January, so I'm going to have the first. I know, so excited about that.
Yeah, everybody know about that. Good. So go to your everyday life for me. Everyday life. Let's call it coaching life when you're in your coaching, and it certainly floods over into regular life, but. We run into these situations. I run into them in my business where not everything is black and white. I'm a black and white guy. I don't like to spend time in the gray. I don't like to be there, but inevitably that comes along. Great times come along, and we all need to know how to navigate those great times. And I'm just curious, how do you navigate those times where like the best decisions maybe not real evident?
Well, back to like my job. I mean, I get asked this all the time about baseball. What is your job? What do you do every day? And truly, it's kind of crisis management. I would say what I started in this business of wanting to, out on the field and coaching, that's probably 10% of my job of actually being on the field coaching. The other 90% is everything else, dealing with all the complexities. And you're basically a CEO of, at this level, you're a CEO of a sports organization. And, but the gray that you talk about, I've never been one to where I put down a list and make team quote unquote rules. I'm about standards. It's like we are going to model and live our standards every single day. And humans are not the same. They're, different situations. So that comes back to my mentoring and my follow-up. Don't back yourself into a corner on something. And I don't say that like that we're ever going to sacrifice integrity or the right thing. The circumstances are different, and so I always try to look at things individually, like what led to this decision or this behavior or whatever the scenario we're talking about, and then take a very pragmatic approach to solving that problem or dealing with that particular issue. And, I'm sure in your business, like I've seen a lot, and I tell my guys that all the time, like, guys, there's not a lot that I haven't seen. I know I'm going to get surprised or I'm going to come upon some different things, but I try to handle everything individually and not, quite frankly, not be so black and white. So it's just living by those standards every day and holding people accountable. There's Sandy Ogg, another very good mentor me in the business side of things, because I really got to dive into that stuff when I was out for that year, and I really fired up the entrepreneur piece of me. And he talks about jobs to be done, that you want to give people expectations and give them specific tasks to do. And then once you do that, then you can hold people accountable. And
let them do it. Yeah. Let them do it. And then hold them accountable.
Well, that's the old father-in-law. Here I go again, but my father-in-law's hire good people and get out of the way.
Yeah.
I sit here today with this on my chest, not because I'm a great baseball coach. It's because I've surrounded myself with some really, really good people that I hire them and get out of the way and let them go.
Yeah. The more I talk to people, and one of the reasons I started this podcast is because I hear stories all the time. In my business, I'm hearing a story about this. I'm hearing a story about that. And it's so interesting to me. But one of the threads in those stories is especially for people that are hiring or have some sort of supervisorial role, they're generally, they say to me, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I hire smart guys in the room so that I can give them tasks and then let them do that. And then, of course, we bring that together, and I take a certain amount of credit for that. But almost to a fault, all leaders are telling me that, I'm not the smartest guy. And I think people like, software guys are a perfect example of that, that bring all of these people into a room and they engineer these pieces of software, these hardware, and all the people that you, the CEOs, the Dells, and everybody, you hear about them, but you don't hear about the people that do all the work. I think that's indicative of that kind of leadership. So I totally agree with that. But let's see here.
Well, but on that, it's funny. You going back to just the time and period where we are in our lives, the different people, but it takes you a while to figure that out. And I think it takes confidence in a leader to get delegated and step back and let people do their jobs. But if you don't, I think it really inhibits, the growth of your organization. And I go back to me when I first started, I was only an assistant, good or bad, for 4 years. And I was an assistant and a guy that let me do things, which ultimately helped. So I would always hold that dear to me. It's like, I want to let my assistants to do things. I want to motivate the way that I wanted to be motivated. It was like, don't micromanage me, like guide me, direct me, teach me, but let me roll. So that's what I try to do with my staff, my players.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This episode of Grind to Growth to Greatness is brought to you by Terry Barr, Distinctive Real Estate, advising families across Pennsylvania and Northern Virginia for over 15 years. Visit the website at terrybarrealestate.com.
So there's a huge difference, at least in my eyes, and you can boil that down. But there is a big difference between college sports and professional sports. And from a college sports, you do a lot of recruiting. You go out and try to bring guys in. You're wooing them here and trying to get him from over there. College or professional sports are a little bit different, and where you're hiring guys and you're drafting them. And this. So tell me about your perspective on the college versus the pro, and is that something you ever thought about making the leap into? In other words, kind of jumping the chasm and going into the pro? Obviously, you could have.
Yeah, and I had those opportunities early on. I think for me, it's a lifestyle piece. Not that you can't have a good lifestyle on the pro side, but when I finished playing, I also did the scout school with the Cubs. I thought I wanted to ultimately kind of do the scouting thing, but I realized quickly that I wanted to be on the other side of the fence.
Right.
But no, I mean, I've thought about maybe my swan song would be to do something on the professional side. But I like the college environment because, and back to what I learned about myself and even in my career, I align and my value set aligns really well with the Big Ten. I like the emphasis on the student athlete. I like this development as the whole person. Not that we didn't do that at Arizona State, because we did, and there were some great kids, and I still value those relationships. But I think just institutionally, philosophy of the conference, it puts a big emphasis on, the athlete part of that, but also when you're finished, who are you? How do you want to be remembered? Yeah. In this place in particular, Terry, I've never seen anything like the Michigan Network. So that's different. I think the professional side of it, you kind of pointed it out. It's professional. Like there's no, you either get it done, or you're gone. And there's not as much, as there's not as much of that development off the field. I think there's been a little bit of a mind shift in that because what is it, the holistic, if you're good in all those areas, it's ultimately going to lead to good field success and playing success too. So there's been investments and new programming on the off the field stuff. But to me, the college versus the pro is more, there's more investment in that human being as a human being at the college level.
Yeah, that's true. I know my son played college football, as you know.
And very well.
Yeah, thanks. But he's, there is an investment in young men at that level, and I think there has to be. I'm a little bit disappointed, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I've been disappointed in professional sports because, as much as that's been a problem, it's been a problem for a long, long time. Having young men, whatever the situation, whether they're coming from tough upbringings or whatever, and that's the way out. I think there's some programming like you're talking about that's needed at an early level for those guys because they come out of college, they become wealthy, and that, what that does. That money will do a lot of negative things as well as good things. So it's interesting. What has NIL done for you guys, for you? What's the big, what's the takeaway there? I know it's early on in stages, but tell me about that.
Well, that's a hard one because everybody's still trying to figure it out. It's really new, and in fact, it's super new for me. The year that I was out was the first year that you could do it. So even me, who's been in this for 30 years, coming back and trying to navigate it. I heard a lot, and I think like what Coach Harbaugh was saying from the Michigan football side, like Michigan. So I was reading about that as I was considering this job, and the public perception was that Michigan was so far behind in NIL. And Coach Harbaugh and Juwan Howard and others were complaining we're not doing enough in that space. But I love their philosophy of it here. We're not, Michigan's philosophy, at least that of our athletic director, Ward Manuel, is it's not a transactional experience. Like this is not a pay-for-play institution. And does NIL, is it changing the face of college athletics? Absolutely. But I don't disagree. And here's the thing, like I don't begrudge the student athletes for getting money or the kids for getting money.
Yeah.
Because you look at the billions of dollars that institutions, conferences, TVs are building off the backs of their laborers, i.e. the athletes. Why shouldn't they get compensated? Yeah. I tell people all the time, when my son was at Indiana, he and our shortstop, they started a burrito delivery business. After hours delivery, and it was shut down by the NCAA because they weren't allowed to make that money, even though it's a legitimate business outside of because they were a student athlete. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
And and in our sport of baseball, where it's not football and basketball, where everything's a full ride, most of our kids are spending several hundred, $1,000, sometimes $100,000 to come to an institution, turning down hundreds of thousands of dollars to start the pro career to pursue their degree. What's wrong, with them getting that? But, is it a bad? I don't think it's a bad thing. I hear people railing on it all the time. I do think it needs to be regulated because there are It's created a lot
Sure.
of pay for play model.
Yeah, there's a very small percentage of the kids that are going to bring that, going to have that opportunity to start with, and then all of a sudden it's equality and it's equity, and then I guess the school I was at Colorado bought everybody a truck. It wasn't Colorado, but it was a school out there, Utah. That's right. Just bought the whole team a truck, and I know that wasn't NIL. It was boosters.
Well, no, that's kind of NIL, and I think the point we need to talk about with that is, and back to the just in people, like you can throw all the money. I won't say the specific institution, but you can look it up. A lot of them threw big money. That doesn't guarantee winning. So it goes back to like you have to invest in people, get the right people and the right culture and all of those things. That's what's going to produce a winning outcome, not just this transactional thing of hey, come play for us for a year and then so.
I wish they'd set it up so the kids didn't have access to the majority of those funds, how big they are, whatever they are, until after their playing career. In other words, some sort of a retirement fund or some sort of a fund that allowed them some income to come off for food. I mean, my son was a full ride student athlete, and I still spent $300 or $400 a month in food. It's so there are some things broken there, but I agree with you. I think the kids should have access to some of those dollars. I'm just not sure how you give it to them without ruining them, or.
So horrible.
I don't know. I don't know the answers.
Yeah, if you figure that out, you do a podcast.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let's get back to it. But, and then I won't take too much of your time. But so tell me about off the field, out of the office. Tell me about your personal passions. Do you have anything? I see some of the stuff you do, and that's generally with your boys or your grandkids or just relaxing or spending time with your family. But anything off the field that you devote some of your mental efforts to, your physical efforts to? I mean, it's a big job, I understand, but.
Yeah, no. Well, I like to work out, but in the sense of, my philosophy on that is one, I'm in an athletic business, but it's like, I think I do some of my best thinking, and ideas when I'm working out, but it's that old pay me now or pay me later philosophy for me that, I want to stay healthy and I've got resources at my disposal. So I like to do that. And I'll do a lot of my calls and whatever I need to do when I'm working out. The other thing, and it was funny, I had some colleagues would reach out to me and be like, hey, how do you handle stress? Like, we're losing and it's getting to me. I go, I know this is going to sound crazy, but what I love to do and my favorite thing to do is watch streaming stuff. Like, because it just takes me away. We can beat ourselves up mentally, and obsess over losses, or I like to just totally divorce. It's a strategy that's worked for me. It keeps my heart rate down, but I like to totally divorce myself from whether it's a tough loss or something, and I do that through streaming. And I actually love and look forward to good content. There's not a lot out there that I haven't seen. I know that sounds crazy, but I love doing that.
So most people trying to get less screen time. You're trying to get more of it because that really helps you in a day-to-day stress reducer, huh?
It is. It really is. And it works for me. And I know that's probably not the most intellectual thing to ever say, but it works for me because what it allows me to do is to totally get out of whatever's going on with me, good, bad, or otherwise, and live vicariously through somebody else, good, bad, or otherwise. And then when that's over, then you're kind of like, okay, now let's roll the sleeves up and get the problem. So,
yeah. Interesting. All right. So what's your favorite stream?
Well, there's no close second, but Breaking Bad was
loved it.
The best ever.
Loved it. I hate when that came to an end.
Oh, I know. But I mean, Peaky Blinders is a really, really good one. There's another one out there, Gangs of London, that didn't get done.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've watched. I'm a big West Wing. Now, here's the thing. I didn't watch a lot of television and things when I was playing. So, and I remember 2013, this is crazy. I was watching Lost at that time, the entire season. But Terry, I remember I'd be standing down there coaching in the third base coaching box during a game and thinking, I can't wait to get back to the hotel. What? So
That's a good, and I do the same thing. I do some streaming of some shows. What was called, I think one of the ones was Dexter. He was, it's a good one. They got, I guess, a new season, like 4 or 5 different. I just watched it the other night.
I've watched a couple of them already, and so my son being in the film space, like we're actually doing the docu-series thing as well. We're actively, we did it at ASU. My athletic director and I got a little sideways, so it never got out, but we basically had the hard knocks of that, and we're currently working on that. In fact, today I had a sales call with one of the major streaming platforms to potentially use their service to do that.
Very cool. Oh, that's interesting. So let's talk just briefly about what's next for Tracy Smith. What's not tomorrow, not next year, but when this whole lifetime experiment comes to an end and you decide to go on from something that's not coaching, what do you think's next for you?
Well, when I was out that year and back to the reframing, it's like, okay, this was the first time. I mean, I jokingly just call it my sabbatical, but I was fired at Arizona State, and I'll sit here today and tell you that was a very humbling experience. I could go into all the reasons why we didn't fail, and it just, sometimes things just come to an end because philosophies don't match. But during that time, I actually had the good fortune, and my entrepreneur spirit was lit up.
Yeah.
The Diamond Allegiance was something that I dove into. And really there's this issue of travel baseball as we know it across the country today. It's taken on back to that whole business thing that we were talking about earlier. I think it's gotten away from when you and I played way back in the day playing. It's like families are investing, I mean, honestly, tuition cost for their kids to play travel baseball. So me and some business people and some of the top people in our game today are saying, look, enough's enough, and working with Major League Baseball and others of saying, look, we know this is broken. Let's try to fix it. So that's what I've been doing. And I kind of say, like, my swan song is when I hope that when I'm done coaching is that I can actually provide all this experience and do a give back of provide true direction to families. Because this false narrative, I call it a false narrative, like if you don't play Power 5 baseball, you're a failure. Like, I hate that. I hate it because going back to my days of Miami, of Ohio, and Miami Middletown where I started, that's not even a branch campus, but I still got excited on wins. I hated the losses, but it was a great fit. So what I'm trying to say is kids could play beyond high school. Any kid could play. Find the right fit. It's out there, but let's get over this notion that you have to play Power 5 to be successful, but also to make this more affordable for families. So
yeah, it's such a slender slice of the talent out there that get to a big league bench somewhere, and the media does a good job of selling the glitz and glamour. Just to use my son as an example, he got every ounce of his talent out of his ability. I mean, he worked harder than anybody I've ever seen. He had some success, real success at high school, good success, had some injuries, all that stuff. But in the end, he wasn't good enough. I mean, All-State 2 years in a row. He was Defensive Player of the Year in the East Coast. I mean, led the D1, just like this. In the end, just wasn't good enough. And I don't know how you present that information to a young student without breaking their spirit and saying, in my eyes, that's the problem. I'm motivated because I want to be like them. Okay, be motivated, go chase that. But when it's time to shut it down, you got to know when it's time.
But back to your question of the college versus pro, as a college coach, you get to weave in all of those messages, all of those life lessons and things that are going to help. Because we say, I coached at some of the coolest players here. Like, think of some of the players that have played here. I mean, Hall of Famers, Arizona State, some of the best to ever play the game, not just college, but the game. But every time I would talk, I would point to their thing up on the board with a recruit and a parent and say, now look at that name, but understand as good as they are or were, their uniform comes off at some day. Who are you? That's the role that I think we have to serve as the coach. But back to that's when I'm involved in that now. I've had to, throttled back a little bit that I've been back into coaching, but I am actively engaged in making this game of baseball better in the long run and getting it back to honestly what it was in before, which play and compete and have fun and stay. You don't have to travel across the country to play a game. You can travel 20 minutes down the,
It's tough. It's tough when you see these guys out there like Schwarber and some of these guys that you've had intimate conversation with making the kind of money they're making. It's a slippery slope that we've kind of slid down, and it's hard to climb back up into a place where these kids can say, hey, I can go have fun and I can compete and I can play, in college or high school or wherever it is and have a good time and not have to worry about, going to the pros or whatever. I think it's just
well, would you agree? I would say the market's going to tell you.
Sure.
Like, be good, be good in what you are, be good today. You said Torkelson earlier. I mean, he's arguably the greatest player on the planet at the time, is the 1-1.
Yeah.
But even he struggled in, his part of his reframing. Just be good today. And you can't force the process. So just enjoy every single day, enjoy life experiences, all the things that come, and the market's going to tell you eventually if you're good enough, just like with what your son had to go.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's a hard thing to come to, but we've all come to it at some point. So, well, listen, I want to thank you for this. It's been a long time since we've talked one-on-one, face-to-face, but a lot of good information, a lot of great insights from a guy like you that's been there. You got 30 years in the business, and hopefully there's as many more years as you want to be in the business will be there for you. I'm excited. I've always loved watching your progression and your successes and your family grow. So thanks for coming on this podcast and sharing your mindset and your successes and failures and a little bit about your family. So thank you.
Well, no, and I'll say the same. It's like, privileged to talk in the business part of it, but to reconnect, man, with childhood buddy. And again, looking at that hat back there, right? I like that hat back on that shelf.
That's right. Right there. We got the old Michigan hat. I even went and made sure I got the right color, because that's the baseball. Absolutely. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for tuning in to the Grind to Growth to Greatness with Tracy Smith, the head baseball coach at Michigan. Tune in this year. If you're not a baseball fan, this is a great time to jump on the bandwagon for Big Blue. And tune in next week when we have our next guest. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you.
You've been listening to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. Our passion is to talk to the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes, anyone who's made it, and dive into their struggles, their successes, and their secrets. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Grind to Growth to Greatness. See you next time.